Welcome to Accounting 201 at Kapiolani Community College. This video will delve into internal controls discussed in Chapter 7 of our textbook. Internal controls are of two major kinds, the kind we don't care about and the kind we do care about. The kind we don't really care about are administrative controls. Those are those policies and procedures that help ensure we have operational efficiency and so forth, and not too much related to accounting. Accounting controls, however, help us to safeguard assets and assure reliability of accounting information. So, a big picture item in internal controls is that for large companies whose stock you can buy on the open market, publicly traded companies, they're governed by the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. In the early 2000s, many large, well-known, highly respected companies went under because they had internal fraud or been running a scam or very questionable accounting policies. And so in reaction to that, the government enacted this act to police the accounting profession as well as publicly traded companies. So that created this unpronounceable acronym board, Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, to help watch the CPAs and make sure that they were doing what they're supposed to be doing. So many smaller companies try to adopt the policies and best practices that large companies follow, and they just do it in a small way in order to try and do a better job of safeguarding their assets. So it's kind of like a good map to follow in order to try to enact some internal control. Much of the Sarbanes-Oxley related provisions and techniques for compliance with it. So techniques for internal control, our book breaks them down into several categories, and I've kind of like done some grouping for you. First thing is you want clear lines of responsibility. This means that for any job related to accounting, there should only be one person to be held accountable. So if money is missing from the cash register on a particular shift and two people had the same access code for that cash register, you can't arrest both people. You can't arrest either person unless somehow or another you have reasonable cause to determine it's one person versus the other. So in other words, there'd be no way to track it down. So that's because you didn't have one person held accountable. In situations we're going to look at where there's a problem of embezzlement, where an employee has stolen from their employer, in many cases, clear lines of responsibility is not a problem. In fact, there's like too much of a clear line. That person is the only person who does accounting. That's not a good thing. So what would be a better way to do it? You should separate related activities that keep record keeping for assets from custody for the assets. That's called segregation of duties or separation of duties. This eliminates the ability of an employee to steal and cover it up. And so your accuracy is improved also because the employees check each other's work. Also, you want to leave an audit trail or follow documentation procedures. Those are the steps that are followed in processing a transaction, and you should be able to reconstruct them through a trail of paper and signatures and so forth to see exactly how a particular transaction was handled. You should also use physical, mechanical, electronic controls. So for example, checks should have the bank account number, the routing number, sequentially numbered check numbers, the company's address and other information. Any invoice given to a customer should have invoice numbers pre-printed on the form. So instead of like running off everything on laser because it's nice and cheap, all that does is provide an opportunity for an embezzler to print their own invoices and steal from cash customers, steal your money coming in from cash customers. Also locks on anything of value, also things that are capable of value, such as unused checks, debit cards, things like that. There are also some old technology that's still in use that can be very effective that essentially makes a check impossible to alter. Computer passwords that are good passwords, and things like voice printing or retinal scanning or whatever. So those are physical controls that help you maintain internal control over your accounting function and custody of your assets. You also want to periodically cross-check or reconcile records that are supposed to match. So the obvious one, the big one we learned in this chapter, is a bank reconciliation. So your cash account general ledger balance should be tied directly to the bank reconciliation reconciled balance for cash. If it's different, something's wrong. Accounts receivable and accounts payable general ledger balance should be the sum of all of your accounts receivable subsidiary ledgers or individual customer account balances should all add up to the accounts receivable account in the general ledger. Individual vendor or supplier account balances should all add up to accounts payable in the general ledger. If they don't, something's wrong. If you receive checks in the mail or other valuables coming through the mail, then you should have a person unrelated to accounting logging that in, and someone should do a function of checking it at the end of the day to make sure that whatever's recorded and deposited matches what was received. Also supplies, if you have, for example, a jewelry light manufacturing or a jewelry retail store where you made your own little settings and set the diamonds or the rubies or whatever in that setting, each one of those things is kind of expensive. You would want to have a supplies checkout list to keep track of who actually took which supplies that helped you make that expensive jewelry. Other things, often not done, pre-hiring background checks for employees, also employee bonding for anybody who's going to be involved in accounting or custody of assets. Bonding is kind of like purchasing insurance on employee honesty. So the bonding company does a background check for you and tells you whether that person is bondable or not. If they're not bondable, then I wouldn't hire them. Also, do some rotation of duties, and so that different people have to do other people's function every once in a while, and on basically a kind of a random basis, so they never know when somebody else is going to take over their duties. And then also make employees take vacations. So why should they take vacations? So they're happy? No, they should take vacations so somebody else does their job while they're out. And if anything strange is going on, it may come to light then. There are also other additional controls you can have. For example, use a checking account and maintain real tight control over it. So if the supplier comes in with $800 worth of beef, what do you call it? Chateaubriand steaks or whatever, and they need $850 because we're on a cash basis only, we're a new account or something, you don't reach into the cash register, pull out $850 and give that to the guy because you'll never be able to tell whether the amount of cash in your register is the same as what there is on the total of the register tapes for the day, and you start losing control over how much cash you really ought to have. Secondly, that means you would deposit all cash receipts intact daily. If you need cash for some other reason, you write a check, send somebody to the bank, cash the check. Endorse all your customer checks as soon as they're received. So on the back, you stamp for deposit only to our company's account. Don't use currency unless you absolutely have to, and that should be typically only for small amounts, like receiving a package for a $35 UPS fee or something like that. And deface documents is especially important. Documents that have been used, paid, for example, received from invoices, employee time card that's had a check issued for those hours should be defaced so they can never be used again because somebody clever can recycle old stuff. So how is our team project connected with this? First of all, team project can be found up on Laulima under Laulima assignments. Once you've been formed into a team, your team members will need to go in and read about how the team project works. For this semester, you'll be required to give me your acceptable article that you found, which I'll discuss in a few minutes, and that will be due on June 12th at 8 in the morning. You will do the discussion and write up about that article, and that document, including that, will be due on Wednesday, June 14th at 8 in the morning. Only one team member should upload the documents for me, and only one document is to be uploaded. That will be this team project write-up form. The instructions for the project are in the project instruction doc here, which looks like this. And this tells you about forming the team and about what you're supposed to do. You need to find a page or an article on the web that discusses an instance of small business embezzlement. It must be small. It must be a business. It can't be a governmental or nonprofit agency. And this article or this story should tell you exactly how the person who embezzled did it. If it's a really short article, then you need to find out more about that person through searching for other instances of articles about them that say something different than the first article did. And we want it detailed enough so that we can understand exactly how the person got away with it. And we also want them to be kind of a smart crook so that they were able to get away with it for a while, typically years, and embezzle lots of money, typically hundreds of thousands of dollars at least. One big requirement: the story, the arrest, arraignment, sentencing, appeal, something legally occurring with this case must have occurred within the last 12 months. So if the crime occurred 3 years ago and the person is appeared in the court on appeal and they recap what happened in the case, it's okay. If the crime occurred 3 years ago and somebody's now remembering what happened and they said, yeah, that was a real case, let me tell you that nothing legal occurring with the case happened within the last 12 months, so you cannot use that article. If you can't confirm for sure that something legal happened with regard to the case within the last 12 months, then don't use that article. You will get 0 credit for it. So make sure you have the right kind of story. Make sure it's embezzlement, and that means an employee stole from their employer. And so an outsider stealing from a company through a clever fraud, not embezzlement. Also, a president of a company will not count as embezzlement because they have godlike powers. So we can't accept any articles about that. So it has to be theft, has to be from a company, has to be a business, has to be small. The article about it and some legal ramifications from it have to have occurred within the last year. Here's some key terms you could use. Also, once you do find an original article about it, you should automatically, as a matter of course, do additional web searches about your perpetrator so you can get a fuller picture how they got away with it for so long. So you can give a detailed account of how they did it. So when you select an acceptable article and I approve of it, then you receive 10 points. Don't do any writing up about it until you've gotten my approval. Next, you have to do the write-up form. Once you've received approval, the write-up form will be worth 20 points. And last, after we've done the write-up form, then you'll do a team presentation during our class session. I'll tell you more about that in class. Here's some examples of things you don't want to pick. I did small business embezzlement, but I forgot to ask about the last year. And I got this really terrific article. It was like so long. It told me so much great stuff about how the person did it, but it happened in 2014. What's wrong with that? Can't use it. Too long ago. It's a great article. It's just too old. And it's been gone over many times by previous students. This one's really good too. Wow, this is really neat. April 7th. I think this is like pretty current, right? Yeah, 2014. Too old. That's a great one too. It's a classic, but it's too old. Here's one. It says Starkey. Hey, wow, $20 million embezzlement. This guy was a president, and that one's no good. He's the president, and it doesn't look very small when we're talking about 20 million. Okay, scratch that one. Massive embezzlement from Maine town. Oh, lots of details. Oh, terrific. And it's like current and everything. You know, it's within the last year, but it's not a business. It's a township or a governmental organization. No, no can do. How's about this one? Little League mom stole $200,000 over the last 10 years. Not a small business. It's a nonprofit or a unincorporated nonprofit. How's about this? Small business embezzlement study. Who introducing her? She's an average embezzler. She works for a bookkeeper. Here's Helen helps herself and da 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 da. No good. This is not a real criminal case. It could be, but it's not. And all they're doing is like inventing a fictitious person who fits the profile of the kind of people who do this. No good. Also, no Reader's Digest kind where they have 4 or 5 different embezzlements all stuck together telling small business owners what to watch out for. No good. How about this one? Contractor defrauds clients. No, that's not an embezzlement. The contractor doesn't work as an employee of the client. The contractor is separate from them. Oh man, how about this one? Woman accused of embezzlement. It's within the last year, I think. I'll double check here. Yeah, February 2017. It's within the last year. I'm good. It's small business owner. It's $40,000. And all I know is that somehow she took $40,000 and she somehow did it with a debit card. Why were they stupid enough to let her do that? I have no idea. I click on this, I'll probably get the same thing. And my guess is when I go searching for more information about her, I'm not going to get too much. There's just too little to go on. How's about this one? Oh, this one came from Department of Justice. It's for Indiana. Seems like some details. Let's try and see what we get for Angela Kincaid, because it said that she forged checks and stole that much money. Here's what she spent it on. She was a bookkeeper. I need to know more about what her bookkeeping responsibility involved. It said trust and authority, but I don't know. She made false entries in the company's ledger. Somehow she excluded checks that were cut to her, but I don't really know her job responsibilities that well. I'd need to find out more about her. So how about I do a search on her? Her name, Angela Kincaid. She is in Seymour, Indiana, apparently. I search for Angela Kincaid and I find, wow, that looks like Angela Kincaid. What's it worth? For us, says Lonnie Kincaid, $5,800. Is really nothing for us. We do things that other people say, man, I wouldn't have done that. You know why? Because we're not even spending our own money. That's why. Okay. But we outbid those guys, let me tell you. Okay. Right. So this will tell you what Angela Kincaid did with the money that she ripped off from her employer. So you can get more information about that. That doesn't really help you explain how she got away with it, but I bet you find more about her when you look it up. Well, hope this helps. Happy hunting.